Thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for the wonderful introduction and for the invitation. It's in fact my second time. I think I've been here. It was about 15 years ago. I was that small when I was giving a lecture before. Anyway, let's jump right in. What I want to share with you today are two projects that I recently completed in my office that in a way, and that's the title, both deal with life. Not what you see as a kind of subtitle is in Hebrew is called lechaim, the toast when you, I don't know, have a glass of wine or have a vodka, and it's this kind of blessing, short blessing that celebrates life. And both projects deal with life in very different ways. One is very directly about life, it's about giving birth. And the other one is about death, but maybe it's also a little bit about life. Anyway, let's start. A couple of years ago, I received an invitation by email asking me to participate in a competition for a new maternity and pediatric hospital in Tambacounda. Writing, dear Manuel, we want to invite you along with 6, 7, 8 other architects to develop a design for this hospital. And I was thinking, how should I respond? It's wonderful to do this project potentially. And I was thinking for quite a long time and eventually wrote a response back to the foundation that had invited me, that was organizing this project, saying, dear Nick Weber, the head of the foundation, thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor, but voila. But I decided not to participate because I think it's not right if 8 architects in Basel, London, Paris, New York are kind of inventing a quote-unquote solution for a region that they don't know, for a program that they haven't really mastered, for doctors that they've never spoken to, for a climate that they don't know, for patients that they haven't spoken to. I think, in all honesty, a competitive approach is maybe not the approach that I would have chosen. I would have preferred maybe a collaborative approach. But I'm sure, Mr. Weber, you'll receive great contributions. Thank you. Goodbye. Half an hour later, the telephone rings. Nick is on the phone. Manuel, let's meet. You really kind of opened an important question. Let's meet. And out of that meeting came a direct commission. And a couple of weeks later, I found myself on the streets of Tambacounda. So by declining to participate in a competition, I actually kind of got the project, and that was not the intention, but of course worked out very well. So what is Tambacounda? Tambacounda is a city of about 100,000 people, about 8 hours drive east of Dakar, the capital of Senegal. It's a city, and forgive me if I use a kind of, just for the sake of speed, simple terms that are imprecise. It's a city that still captures a little bit of a, let's say, rural life in the large urban environment that Tambacounda is. It's the largest city of eastern Senegal. It's a city of about 100 years old, and it's in fact a city that is quite, let's say, uncommercialized, or where let's say our consumerism hasn't yet spread everywhere, and therefore it's very, very horizontal city, very beautiful actually. In this city, we have an existing hospital that was built in the 1970s, 1980s. It consists of 5, 6, 7 of these circular buildings, and it is this hospital that I was going to extend with a new maternity and pediatric center. The hospital, the architecture is in fact quite nice, quite beautiful, but it's its condition is very problematic. The hygienic condition is very problematic. The equipment is very, very basic, and I don't need to spell out that hygiene translates immediately into life expectancy, into survival rate of newborns, of women giving birth, and so on and so on. So there was really a lot of work that needed to be done. Tambacounda is in a very, very hot area, the hottest kind of area of Senegal. 2 months of rainy season where it's, I don't know if you work centigrade or Fahrenheit, it's like 38 degrees and 1000%, I know it doesn't exist, of humidity. And then we have 10 months of very, very dry heat. This is the rainy season. So instead of coming with a design proposal, I said, let's meet and let's come with a team of colleagues and people from my office, and let's study everything about the area. So we looked at the history of the city. We looked at building materials. We looked at local resources. We looked at climate. We looked at I don't know, the cultural production, the music, the food, and so on. We tried to learn as much as possible, and we put it together in this kind of, let's say, a book of research, maybe 200 pages. And then we spoke with the doctors, the head of maternity, head of pediatric, and we asked them, what do you actually need? We asked the nurses, what is the kind of flow of stuff through the hospital? If you were to draw your hospital, what would it look like? What is the kind of flow of people and of things through the building? And they sketched it out. So this is exactly the sketches that the doctors, heads of their departments, kind of traced on paper, and in a way, we just translated it into, let's say, a more regular flow chart, one can say. And we spoke with administration and the contractors, potential contractors, and so on. And only then we went back to Switzerland and sat down and thought, okay, with all of this kind of accumulated information, what can we do? What would be, let's say, a wise or interesting step to start developing a design? So this was very, very important for us. We don't start with design. We start with listening or with observing. And then eventually we, of course, did develop a design proposal. After several weeks, and we were given a site which was kind of on the north of this arrangement of circular existing buildings, and our design proposal was based on let's say 2 premises, or was based on 2 main, let's say, form-giving factors. One is, we said we wanted to make the building as long as possible, and we wanted to make the building as narrow or as thin as possible. And then, of course, the third element that comes in is this kind of circular or circulinear shape that is, of course, a kind of reaction to the existing context, to the circular buildings that it kind of embraces, wraps around, creating new spaces, new courtyards, and could potentially also in the future be used as further extensions. But going back to kind of the idea of let's make a building as long as possible and as thin as possible, the length is in a way a function of social interaction. When people come, when patients come to the hospital, they don't come on their own. And they often come from quite far away. They come from villages that are a couple of hours of drive or maybe a day of travel, and they usually come with their families. So It's a hospital with about 150 beds, and you can imagine that if everybody comes with a family, there's a lot of people. So we wanted to create a lot of social spaces for interaction, spaces for lingering, spaces for waiting, spaces for playing, new courtyards, spaces of different sizes, of large and of small sizes, extroverted and introverted. And this all takes place along this kind of long corridor, long spine that is always on the concave side of the curve. And the thinness is in a way a function of climate is a reaction to climate. We wanted to create a hospital building that is more or less independent of energy needs, that at least reduces the pressure and the demand on energy and reduces the demand on artificial cooling. So by making a building very narrow, we have a corridor and rooms only to one side. We could, through architecture, create a system of cross ventilation, where through a series of brise-soleil louvers and openings, the wind can pass through the building, keeping the rain out, keeping the sun out. Actually, Tambacounda is not only hot, but also there's very little wind. And through this brise-soleil, we create temperature difference, and temperature difference translates into air movement, and therefore we, in a way, create, or the building itself becomes a little bit of its own climate machine, or creates its own microclimate, because there's always different parts of the building that are shaded or non-shaded, passing through and then the air passing through the thinness of the building, and with a kind of double vaulted roof. We have an exterior roof that protects from the sun, and an interior roof with openings. We also have a kind of chimney effect and convection of air rising up. So these were all kind of thoughts that we developed in a proposal, and we thought, I think we better test it out. No, it's there's a lot that depends on this kind of brise-soleil wall, a lot on this how much rain will pass through, how much sun will pass through, how much wind will pass through, and we were thinking that it's quite in a way a risk, and we can't do that just out from paper. So we developed something, or we proposed something that is very, let's say, coming from the logic of, again, without using too much cliches, from a kind of Western perspective. We asked the contractor, can you build a test facade? No, that's something very, very common. I guess you also have it here with many big buildings. When you want to test how they will look in reality, you say, okay, I don't know, 10, 20 square meters, you build one-to-one exactly in the materiality scale and so on, as the final building to test on the site itself how that facade will look and perform. And that's exactly what we told Mageba, the contractor. I sent him drawings, 10 meters wide, 4 meters high, and I indicated the spot on the compound of the hospital where that test facade should be constructed, and different shapes of the perforated brick. And here you see two. We wanted to test out 4 different brick geometries with slightly different openings and slightly different geometries. How many bricks could you do per hour, and so on. And then a week or so later, he sent us back this photograph. And I thought, okay, looks good, but it's a little bit more than I sent him, because I had sent him a drawing that kind of goes, that shows exactly this wall, but he was clearly building a little bit more than that. And I also noticed that the site is clearly not on the site of the hospital. It's somewhere else, I don't know where, but it's not the hospital site. Okay. And then another week or so later, he sent us back the finished wall, and it was this. What in fact Mageba had done was he knew that a small village 50 kilometers south of Tambacounda needed a school. And he thought, why do you build a test facade that you would look at for an hour or two and then tear down again if you can just extend the one wall by 3 other walls and put a roof over, and voila, you have a school. So he kind of kidnapped the drawings for the test facade and by himself, quite sneakily, without telling me, created the school, which in a way is absolutely genius, because of course we get something that is of much more use, and now this village has a new school which is perfectly ventilated, and we have a kind of can do a long-term study of how the bricks actually perform over time and in different seasons, and in a way it's a beautiful way of doing architecture where you're not in control, where you have a kind of hybridity of you have hybrid program, hybrid function, and hybrid authorship that in a way produces a result that is much more meaningful and maybe also much more beautiful than what I could have come up with or what I did come up with. And it is only through this kind of almost unknown collaboration, unknown to me, that produced this little school in Sarasidi. This is Mageba with a very cool shirt, who is the contractor, who in fact is not only a contractor, but who is also a medical doctor. So he is by daytime, he's a medical doctor in the villages south of Tambacounda, because he was building clinics, rural clinics across eastern Senegal. He discovered his, in a way, talent of organizing construction sites, and discovered that this is also a kind of a second area where he can and wants to become active, so he is kind of a medical doctor by daytime and a contractor by afternoon and evening time, and in a way, out of this initial kind of let's say collaborative project, developed a wonderful collaboration overall in building the hospital, and eventually doing much more. It is based on this brick. The brick is, or that's, let's say, it's the smallest unit of this collaboration. It's a cement-based brick. It's not clay. It's not burnt it's not burnt in the oven. It's cement-based, so it's just compressed and dries in the sun, or dries in the air. And it is from this very kind of shape that the construction workers produced eventually 40,000 bricks over the period of a year and a half, producing all the bricks for the hospital. I say this also because for us it was extremely important that everything is produced on site, that all the materials are coming from mostly eastern Senegal or the wider areas of Senegal. Nothing apart from X-ray machine is imported into Senegal from other countries. We tried to produce everything with local resources. Eventually, we, as I said, the construction workers made many thousands of these bricks, and we started constructing and building the hospital. But then we thought, in a way, the school is maybe gave us a kind of insight into how we wanted to proceed on a larger scale, because it's the school we could think of as a little bit of a satellite of the hospital. Not that it's functionally connected to the hospital, but it's let's say shares a spirit and shares also design elements to it. And we worked with a foundation who had anyway been active in Eastern Senegal for the last 15 years to develop additional program. So what we are working on at the moment, for example, is staff housing for the medical staff of the hospital. Tambacounda is, even though it's a fascinating city, it's not very, let's say, popular amongst many Senegalese doctors. The medical community mostly studies in Dakar and often has all their family also in Dakar. And for them to live 8 hours away from Dakar is a bit, I don't know, not so popular. So and then Tambacounda also doesn't have a lot of, let's say, there's not high quality apartments. So we thought by designing and building apartments, it will make the city more attractive to medical staff. It will enable medical staff to stay longer in Tambacounda, not giving up after half a year and moving back to Dakar, but maybe staying for 1 or 2 or 3 years. And this immediately translates again into the quality of public health if the staff of the hospital is more stable and doesn't rotate so quickly. So this is something that we are working on at the moment. When my wife and me got married in the during the construction period, we said to our wedding guests who came for the party that we don't want presents, but please all donate your money, and from the money that we collect, we will build the first playground of Tambacounda, the first playground, in fact, in Eastern Senegal. We wanted a playground that is very, very close to the hospital and that, in a way, becomes an interface for the general population of Tambacounda to come and have their kids play in the playground, so that you always hear laughter next to the hospital, because I think this is very, very important. My little son had to test it out when he came for the opening. The contractor Mageba really kind of took a liking with the bricks. He thought they worked very well. And when he was asked independently of me to build several kindergartens, again in villages 20-30 kilometers south and east of Tambacounda, he kind of took the brick and used it himself to design and build these kindergartens like this one or like this one just under construction. So the brick has become almost like a new kind of local, let's say, local style or a new vernacular that starts to infiltrate the region of Tambacounda. And as I said before, I think the video, this one doesn't work. We made sure that only craftsmen from the region, construction workers from the region, are building the hospital, building the schools, building the staff housing, and so on, so that eventually all the money also that the foundation invests remains in the region and helps also the region economically. So what we end up with is, in a way, not just an architectural project of one building in one city, but a range of spatial interventions from the very smallest unit of the brick to kind of mid-size or smaller and mid-size architectural interventions to let's say, regional interventions or working on a regional level through economy, but also through public health, to create a kind of a regional approach of how to intervene in Eastern Senegal, and also how to, let's say, tie together or embed this hospital with the local economy, local population, and local community. And I thought that this is extremely important, that this is not a kind of an alien coming from the outside being dropped through a helicopter, but it's actually a very, very extended, long process that this necessitates. The hospital by now has been completed. It was built over a period of, let's say, 2 years, exactly coinciding almost with COVID, with the pandemic. I was there for the opening in March, April this year, and you have to take my word that this kind of brise soleil actually really works. It creates an air movement that you have standing in this space, in this very space, and throughout the corridors in the rooms that you normally don't have. It does actually create a more kind of comfortable environment. It also creates this kind of delaminated skin, so the facade becomes thicker and thicker and thicker, creating these kind of niches of lingering and waiting. The playground during construction time was the favorite hangout of the construction workers. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, the building turns into a disco ball. Here you see it from the air, and a kind of a small animation or video of also again how the hospital is in a way embedded in a local, let's say, community and local climate. And kind of last view over this quite magnificent city of Tambacounda. Let's change locations. Let's change sides. We go to Ukraine. We go to Kiev. We go to Babyn. It was in 1941, in September 1941, that the German Nazi Wehrmacht invaded Ukraine, coming from the west, crossing the border from Poland into Ukraine, and moving on towards the east, towards Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. Moving through this urban and rural territory, the Wehrmacht left behind them a kind of a trail of destruction and murder. Through every village that they moved through, they singled out the Jewish population, brought them into the forest, and killed them, shot them. It's an uncountable number of people getting killed by the German army moving through the country, and it's a kind of anonymous killing, leaving almost no trace, and the corpses disintegrating in the forests outside of the villages. The Wehrmacht invaded Kiev on the 19th of September 1941, and a few days later distributed leaflets throughout the city asking the Jewish population to assemble on the 29th of December on one particular street crossing in the northwest of Kiev, on the northwestern edge, or what was then the northwestern edge of Kiev, demanding that every Jew pack his or her belongings, take one single suitcase, identity papers, the valuables, and collect at that particular street corner. 35,000, almost 35,000 Jews thought they were going to be resettled. In fact, they were all shot. They were all killed. Within 2 days, almost 35,000 people were shot in a ravine, in a gorge on the northwestern edge of Kiev. What you see here are in a way, the only photographic documentation of this mass killing. It's one of the worst massacres of the 20th century. Hardly ever has there been so many people getting killed, getting shot in so little of time. And what you see here are the personal belongings that they had to discard, that the dresses that they had to undress before they were being shot. And you can imagine how kind of every piece of clothing that you see here is one life being killed. Where is Babyn? Babyn is an ancient name of a gorge, of a ravine on the then outskirts of Kiev. Kiev by now has, of course, grown tremendously and has overgrown Babyn in the wide rectangle. But at that time, it was marked the edge of the city. It was always a kind of a mysterious site. It was always a site of let's say, the unknown. No, it was the place where the witches were supposed to live. It was a place of several cemeteries. There was a Jewish cemetery, there was a Christian Orthodox cemetery, there was a Muslim cemetery, it was a place of darkness and mystery, and it was also and it still is very much marked by a steep topography, a steep ravine, and it is maybe no coincidence that the Nazis used this ravine for mass killing, so that they didn't even have to dig out mass graves. They just used the existing topography. Today, it is quite, let's say, a weird place. It's a place that is still marked by this very kind of extreme topography. It's also a place of recreation, where you go kind of mountain biking. There's or was the main TV tower of Kiev standing on the site of the former massacre. We have here the entrance to that big site that also now has or where the Jewish cemetery has kind of been relocated to, the cemetery predating the war. And during the Soviet era, there was a very, very uneasy, let's put it this way, an uneasy relationship to the massacre, and there was almost no, let's say, memorial landscape commemorating the massacre, and especially not, there was never anything commemorating the Jewish dimension of the massacre. And the only memorials that were erected is in fact this one that commemorates the Soviet victims of the massacre. In fact, after it was not only the killing of the 29th and 30th of September, but also in the weeks after that, several thousands or 10,000 people were again shot in the ravine altogether, and the exact number is not known. Maybe 100,000 people getting killed in this area. There's also, I don't know, a weird kind of monastery, Orthodox monastery on the site. So it's a very weird mixture of stuff. You have people, I don't know, doing picnics on the Sunday afternoon. You have kebab stores. You even have whoever came up with this idea should be punished, but you have the Ukrainian police having a shooting range installed on the grounds of the massacre. So you have a very kind of absurd, almost theater of stuff that goes into every kind of direction. And you still have the territory that where one could say metaphorically and directly, whatever you see here is growing out of death. So I received a telephone call in October 2020, which was in fact a direct commission, asking me to develop a proposal for a synagogue on that site. And I thought it was a very beautiful idea because it was the first step of a new kind of commemorative landscape of architectural interventions being initiated. And the first step was the synagogue, and I really liked that we're not starting with the memorial, we're not starting with sort of looking backward, we're starting with looking forward. We're starting by bringing Jewish life back to the place where it was eradicated 80 years earlier. But of course, I was thinking, like, how, as an architect, do I respond to this like extreme violence, extreme kind of darkness of what we as human beings are capable of doing, of killing, of murdering? How do I respond architecturally to this incredibly, unbelievably vast crime? And usually, maybe the intuitive response would have been, and we know this, would have been to construct something that is very kind of somber, that is very heavy. No, there's almost this kind of equation that if the crime is very, very heavy, then the architecture that commemorates that crime or the victims of that crime also needs to be very heavy. No, it's almost like a stupid architectural equation. And we know this kind of genre of Holocaust memorials or other kind of massacre memorials that work usually with symmetry, with perspective, and with lots of concrete and lots of heavy, big stones. And I thought, I don't want that. I thought that this is maybe not the right approach because I wanted something that is much more kind of open, that also doesn't tie the visitor into a single position from which he or she then needs to look at the memorial and maybe read the sentence that is written on this kind of memorial. And so there's not this, I didn't like this kind of this choreography of memorials that force you into a single standpoint from which you are supposed to read and understand what the memorial is about. And I thought I wanted something much more open, because after all, there were 35,000 Jews being killed that all had their own language, all had their own hopes, all had their own lives, all had their own kind of loves and desires and pains and whatever. And you can't reduce it to a single sentence or to a single standpoint. I wanted something much more open. And then I was thinking, if we are building a synagogue, what's a synagogue? And of course, to bring a book into the equation is not very novel. It's not very, and I wouldn't be the first to do that. But I was thinking that maybe we can push it much further. And I was thinking of these books, these kind of pop-up books that we kind of know and that we know from, I don't know, museum bookstores and so on. And I was thinking that in a way they share something very intimate with what a synagogue in fact is. Because what do we do in a synagogue? We go, and we usually go with a group of people. No, it doesn't work on your own. You have to be 10 men, but let's say 10 people, and you open a book together and you read it together. And this book, the Bible or the book of prayers, opens this kind of universe for you of stories, of law, of religious thinking, of moral, of love. And in a way, that's exactly what is happening in these kind of pop-up books, because you kind of open them up and they unfold a universe that you didn't expect and that you want to discover, and you discover by putting your nose in and kind of really climbing into them. So I thought, let's do exactly that. Let's make a building that opens up. No, it's easy. Of course, it's not. So we designed a building that really opens up. That's quite large. It's like 12 meters high, 8 meters wide. That's kind of the walls are thick. They contain actually also staircases and balconies and so on. And we built it. We built it all of wood. And it's old wood coming 100 years old, coming from all over the Ukraine, oak wood. And then I thought we should paint it. We should use ornament to tell other stories, because there is a kind of unique tradition of synagogue architecture from the dating back to the 16th, 17th, and 18th century that developed in Ukraine and Poland, that has this incredibly rich ornamentation inside, also pictorial representation. As you see here, they have all been destroyed, but there was this incredible, quite unique tradition that I wanted to kind of reinterpret maybe in contemporary terms. And it was especially this photograph that I really loved, that shows this kind of spaghetti of flowers interwoven and text. I like working with text, and I looked at it many times, and at some point I asked maybe the obvious question, what's actually written here? So I asked a friend, my Hebrew is not very good, I asked a friend to identify the prayer. I had imagined that it's kind of a standard Jewish prayer. It's not the Shema Israel, but I don't know, some standard Jewish prayer. But in fact, he came back to me and said, it's a quite obscure blessing dating back to the Talmudic era, 1,500 years ago, and it's a blessing about dreams. And in fact, it's about the interpretation of dreams, and more precisely, it's about how to turn a nightmare into a good dream. And I thought, that's such a coincidence, or that's such a, this is exactly what we want to do there. That's exactly the spirit, in a way, or the leitmotif of the synagogue, to turn a nightmare into a new dream that is maybe good. So we used this kind of ornament, developed a kind of painting for the interior, and for the ceiling. I wanted to anchor the building very precisely in one point in time and one point in space. So we took the star constellation of the 29th of September 1941 that was visible over Kiev. So it's in a way the last thing that the Jews saw before they were shot, and we turned it into a drawing that is kind of almost scientific. Every flower is a star, every star is a flower. It's exactly the star constellation over the night sky of Kiev when the massacre began, and this has been painted with a collaboration with the Ukrainian artist onto the ceiling, and of course it's also, say, beautiful, and maybe it links back to this kind of thought of death and beauty in a kind of circle. We developed the design proposal for the overall wall, and painted it, or the Ukrainian artist painted it over a very long period, several weeks, several months, until all the walls were in fact then covered. It's almost like a texture or text on the wood. The whole building is constructed out of wood, and for me this is very, very important, because now, as I said in the beginning, maybe it's the most uncommon material for use in a memorial setting. As I said, most memorials are made of concrete or stone. And with concrete or stone, you can think, now I build a memorial out of concrete and come back 500 years later and it'll still be there. It won't have changed much. But with wood, in a way, it forces you to, wood introduces a certain kind of fragility that it becomes fragile, and you need to take care of it, and you need to take care of it every day. You need to repair it and oil it and kind of be nice to it. And in a way, maybe this is exactly what remembrance is, to take care of something every day. So I thought maybe wood, in fact, is the most commemorative material for commemorative architecture, even though it's maybe the most unusual one. The building was completed summer, autumn last year. It actually opens. It kind of hovers slightly above the ground, because we also didn't want to disturb the ground that has seen so much death. We didn't want to disturb it even further. And it's actually used as a synagogue. The chief rabbi of Ukraine is kind of in charge, and has or at least up to the war, had a quite dense program of events and religious services and seminars and so on. It sits a little bit like a house in the forest. This shows my wonderful wife and my beautiful kid, my boy. You've seen him before, and I show this photo not out of let's say vanity, but because he was very important for me, my little son, because he was born 2 weeks before I got the commission. So it's like almost coincidental. It coincides. And when I got the commission to work on this project, I was reading a lot of books on Babyn, on the history, eyewitness reports that tell of this massacre. And when you read them, there's this kind of almost unbearable darkness of the stories being told of what we as human beings are capable of committing, what kind of crime we are able to commit, and it's kind of it's inside of us. It's not an alien race that made this. It's us people, us human beings who did it. Reading this really brings you to this kind of extreme darkness of what we are capable of doing. But at the same time, I was looking into the eyes of my little son, who was born, and who was so happy to be alive, and who was so happy to be on this world, on this planet, and who was enjoying life so much. He was laughing. And I thought, no, this tells me a lot, that this building cannot be only about death and dying. It has to be about the future, and it has to be about, in a way, celebrating the beauty of life. And that's, in a way, what the building is supposed to do. So it really kind of opens. See if it's a manual process. It's not at the press of a button. It takes 10, 15, 20 minutes. You have to do it in a team of people. It's a kind of mechanic thing. Speed up a bit. It's of course also a spectacle, and it's like there's let's say a storytelling in it. The opening process itself is almost like telling a story. Then once the main mechanism has opened up, then the praying platform opens, the so-called bima, and the women's gallery opens, unfolds. There's the staircase in here, and then kind of presenting itself to the public. It was inaugurated on the 5th of October 2021. I was. This is a rabbi who was born on the day of the massacre, singing the the Kaddish, the prayer to the death. I was, let's say, proud to be able to guide the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and the president of Israel and the German president through the building. This photo looks like it's from another era. And we know the story then. Very tragically, war has come back to Ukraine. This is a photograph showing taken a few days after the war started. And what you see here is the TV tower being attacked, but not only the TV tower is on the site of Babyn. Rockets hitting also a sports center 150 meters away from the synagogue, killing 5 people. And it's in a way, it's a bizarre or sad that war comes back exactly to the location where this massacre had taken place 80 years earlier, as if we really don't learn anything from history, or it shows us that we don't learn anything, or it shows us that at least in Europe, a continent that is so full of wars, looking back in history, that maybe it is not a coincidence that war revisits again and again and again, always these kind of same locations where war has taken place earlier. Maybe it's a very typical thing for Europe. The building, the synagogue was not damaged. And of course, every single loss of life is so much more tragic than the potential loss of the building would have been. And it still stands until today. But maybe, and I will close with this, what we have lost with the war is a certain kind of, let's say, value that maybe I hope to be able to say the building stands for, which is, let's say, a colorfulness of life. Where in life it's not only black and white, and it's not only good and bad, or supposedly good and supposedly bad, but we have the whole rainbow colors of everything in between. And this kind of fragility that the building stands for is something that has been lost through this war. And the war has forced us to now choose. It's either black or it's or it's white. It's the supposedly good and the supposedly bad, and there's nothing in between. Whereas this building, I think, represents this kind of celebration of the billion colors that are in between black and white. And this is something that I quite regret. And thank you for your attention.